The Amber Alert sirens of Riverspine Outpost screamed through the morning air, making every parent on the colony grab their children a little tighter. 3 Syr'kat cubs had vanished near the Singing Canopy, that massive forest of ironwood trees that hummed when the wind blew through them just right. Commander Relvar stood at the control center, his 4 arms moving in perfect coordination as he directed search teams across holographic maps. The cub's mother, Tova, trembled beside him, her fur standing on end with worry. "They were just playing by the forest edge," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Just for a few minutes while I spoke with the market vendor. I turned around and they were gone." "We'll find them," Relvar promised, though his stomach twisted with doubt. The ironwood forest was massive, and their drones kept returning strange, scrambled readings. Something about the trees themselves seemed to confuse the sensors. 3 cubs, all under 8 years old, lost in that enormous forest. The thought made his heart beat faster. Meanwhile, 30 feet up in an ironwood tree at the edge of town, human maintenance technician Avery Pike flipped another pancake on his portable camping stove. The pancake sailed through the air in a perfect arc, golden and steaming, and that's when a small furry paw shot out and snatched it mid-flight. "That's theft, you know," Avery said calmly, not even turning around. A chorus of chirping giggles answered him. 3 Syr'kat cubs sat on his treehouse floor, the stolen pancake already being torn into equal pieces with the precision only siblings could manage. The brave one, who Avery had started calling Pip, held up his piece triumphantly. The observant one, Rao, carefully mimicked Avery's way of eating, taking small, polite bites. The smallest one, Lumi, had somehow gotten syrup on her ears and was trying to lick it off, her tiny pink tongue not quite reaching. Before we continue this story, I should mention that YouTube analytics shows me that 93% of you wonderful viewers haven't subscribed yet. Subscribing is completely free, it really helps our community grow, and I'd love for you to be part of our storytelling family. If you enjoy stories about humans doing the right thing even when the rules make it complicated, hit that subscribe button. Also, drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from. I love hearing from viewers across the galaxy. Now back to our treehouse. Avery had found the cubs about an hour ago, huddled under his platform during his morning coffee. They'd been shivering, covered in dew, making tiny scared sounds that no child of any species should ever have to make. They'd climbed up his rope ladder like they belonged there, and honestly, with those big golden eyes and scared expressions, how could he turn them away? He reached for his communicator, dialing the emergency line. This should be simple. Report the cubs, wait for pickup. Everyone goes home happy. Emergency services, the automated voice said, crisp and professional. Please state the nature of your emergency. I found 3 missing Syr'kat cubs. They're safe in my treehouse at grid reference 77 Alpha. Proximity alert. The system suddenly blared, making him jump. You are currently within 3 meters of non-kin juveniles. Per Protocol 4.2, immediate separation is required. Contact beyond initial reporting is strictly forbidden. But I'm trying to report them right now. Maintaining proximity constitutes a violation. Terminate contact immediately. I can't terminate contact, they're in my treehouse. I'm trying to help. Click. The line went dead. Avery stared at his communicator in disbelief. The system had actually hung up on him. He tried calling back, but now his number was blocked for proximity violation. A red message flashed on his screen. Your communication privileges have been suspended for 24 hours due to Protocol 4.2 violation. Okay, he muttered, pulling out his tablet. Let's try the text reporting system. The digital form was from a software update circa 2387, roughly 20 years out of date. The interface was clunky, half the buttons didn't work, and it took him 5 tries just to get past the species verification screen. He filled it out carefully, found juveniles. My location. Need pickup. The system accepted it with a cheerful ding, then displayed, your report will be processed within 24 to 72 hours. Thank you for being a responsible colony citizen. 3 days. The system would take 3 days to process an emergency report about missing children. Avery looked at the cubs, who had finished their pancakes and were now investigating his toolbox with the focused intensity of engineers. Lumi had somehow fit herself entirely inside a hard hat and was walking around bumping into things. Rao was copying Avery's concerned expression perfectly, furrowing his little brow in an exact mirror image. Pip was testing how many wrenches he could hold with his tail. Current count was 4. "Looks like you're stuck with me for a bit," Avery said. A weather alert popped up on his tablet, the screen flashing orange. A storm system was moving in faster than expected. Original estimate said 2 days, but the pressure readings suggested it might arrive tonight. The wind was already picking up, making the ironwood trees start their haunting song. Above them, a search drone hummed past, its camera sweeping the forest in precise patterns. But the ironwood trees were special. Their sap contained trace minerals that scattered most scanning frequencies. Combined with the salvaged hull plating Avery had used to weatherproof his treehouse roof, the whole structure was basically invisible to electronic surveillance. The drone blinked once, twice, then moved on, registering nothing but trees and empty air. "We'll get you home," Avery promised the cubs, though he wasn't sure how. Somehow. Down at the forest perimeter, a patrol stopped at Avery's property line. Officer Chin, a young human who'd just joined the force, pointed at a sign hanging on the fence. It was written in Syr'kat script, an old safety notice Avery had found in a surplus store and put up as a joke years ago. "What does that say?" Chin asked his partner. The automatic translator on his device struggled with the old dialect. "I think it says, 'Free cubs inside,'" the first patroller said, squinting at his screen. "No, wait," his partner checked his own device. "Mine says, 'Free the cubs inside.' That's worse." They called it in immediately, and within an hour the administration had tagged Avery's property with an official notice. "Do not approach human property under investigation." The bright yellow holographic barrier flickered to life around his fence line. The sign was meant to prevent panic, but it had the opposite effect. Now everyone was suspicious of the weird human who lived in a tree and apparently had something to do with cubs. Neighbors who had waved to him for years now hurried past with worried looks. Inside the treehouse, blissfully unaware of the growing suspicion below, Avery was setting ground rules. He sat cross-legged on the floor, the 3 cubs arranged in a semicircle in front of him like the world's furriest classroom. "Okay, little ones. Some safety basics. No climbing on the railings," he pointed to the wooden barriers around the platform. "Yes, I know you have excellent claws. Yes, I see you can hang upside down, Pip. That's very impressive. Still no climbing on the railings." Pip's ears drooped slightly, but he chirped in agreement. "The toolbox is off limits," Avery continued. "Those are sharp things that can hurt you. And this," he pointed to the emergency supply box with its red cross, "has flares and other dangerous stuff, so absolutely do not touch." "Toolbox off limits," Lumi repeated in her tiny voice, her pronunciation careful and serious. Then she turned to her brothers with all the authority a 5-year-old could muster. "You heard him. Off limits." She appointed herself the safety officer, smacking Rao's paw when he reached for a screwdriver 10 minutes later. "No. Off limits means off limits." Avery tried calling the Colonial Liaison office, specifically their Department for Interspecies Family Services. Maybe they could override the emergency system. The phone rang once before an auto-reply kicked in, playing cheerful hold music. "The Liaison office is closed for the Festival of Nesting Lights," a recorded voice said. "We'll return in 72 hours. If this is an emergency, please contact emergency services." Emergency services, which had already hung up on him and blocked his number. The cubs were adapting quickly to the treehouse. Pip had found Avery's collection of blankets and built an impressive nest in the corner, arranging them by softness and warmth with surprising expertise. Rao was sitting exactly like Avery sat, legs crossed, back straight, watching everything with those big, intelligent eyes that seemed to understand more than a child should. Lumi had discovered that if she tapped the solar battery just right, it made a funny buzzing sound that made her giggle every single time. Thunder rolled in the distance, low and ominous. The storm was definitely coming faster than predicted. The weather systems on this planet were notoriously unpredictable, but this felt different. "Urgent. Storm?" Pip asked, his ears flat against his head with worry. In his short life he'd already learned that storms meant danger. "Storm," Avery confirmed, keeping his voice calm. "But we're safe up here. I built this place to survive anything." He knocked on the solid ironwood beam that served as the main support. See? Strong as a mountain. We'll beat the storm, he told Pip, who had pressed against his leg at the sound of thunder. The little cub was trembling slightly. I promise. That night, Avery made a bed for the cubs out of every soft thing he owned. They curled up together, tails tangled, making soft purring sounds in their sleep. He sat watch, looking out at the searchlights sweeping through the forest below, knowing 3 sets of parents were out there, terrified, looking for their babies who were safe and warm just a few hundred meters away. He tried the emergency line one more time from an old backup communicator. This time he got a different automated message. Your location has been flagged for Protocol 4.2 violation. Please maintain minimum distance of 50 meters from any non-kin juveniles. Failure to comply may result in criminal charges. Criminal charges. For keeping 3 lost children safe in a storm. The next morning came too bright and too early. Commander Relvar stood over his tactical display, frustration evident in all 4 of his clenched fists. Every search pattern led to the same conclusion. The cub's trail ended at the forest edge, right near the human's property. But scans showed nothing. Drones found nothing. Ground teams found nothing. The human, he said finally, the words tasting strange in his mouth. Pike. His property is right where the trail ends. He's got that sign, his lieutenant, a young Syr'kat named Kiva, mentioned. The one that might mean he has cubs. Translation's unclear, but it's suspicious. And that new administrative tag warning people away, another officer added. Yellow level security barrier. That doesn't happen without reason. Relvar made a decision that would change everything. I'm going to talk to him. Personally. The drive to Avery's property took only minutes, but Relvar spent them reviewing everything he knew about the human. Maintenance technician, 6 years on the colony, no criminal record, known for being helpful but keeping to himself. Built that treehouse with his own hands, spending his free time up in the canopy. Quiet, competent, and now possibly harboring missing cubs. Avery heard the official vehicle before he saw it, the distinctive hum of its hover engines cutting through the morning birdsong. He quickly ushered the cubs into what he called the quiet game. Hide and don't make a sound until I say it's safe. It's like hide and seek, he explained quickly. But the most important part is being super quiet. They were remarkably good at it, diving into their blanket nest and pulling the covers over their heads. Except for Lumi, who thought hiding meant sitting perfectly still in plain sight with her eyes closed. If she couldn't see you, clearly you couldn't see her. Lumi, sweetheart, you need to actually hide, Avery said gently. I am hiding, she insisted, eyes still squeezed shut. There wasn't time to argue. Avery scooped her up and tucked her in with her brothers, then climbed down to meet his visitor. The knock at his gate was polite but firm. 3 measured raps that somehow conveyed both authority and restraint. Avery took a breath and opened it. Commander Relvar was impressive up close, nearly 7 feet tall, covered in sleek gray fur with darker stripes, forearms folded in what Avery recognized as a formal greeting posture. His golden eyes, so similar to the cubs upstairs, were sharp and worried. Mr. Pike, the commander said. His tone was professional but tight with barely controlled emotion. I'm sure you're aware we're searching for 3 missing cubs. I heard the alerts, Avery said carefully. He wouldn't lie, he was terrible at it anyway, but he couldn't exactly tell the truth either, not without violating the protocol that had already gotten him blocked from emergency services. Your property is of interest. Relvar's eyes moved past him to the treehouse platform visible through the trees. The trail ends here. I spend a lot of time in the forest, Avery said. The ironwood trees interfere with scans. You know that, right? The mineral content in the sap? It's like a natural interference field. Relvar's eyes narrowed. You seem to know a lot about our scanning limitations. I'm a maintenance tech. It's literally my job to know why equipment fails. I've repaired your scanning arrays 3 times this year alone. From up in the treehouse came a sound, a perfect whistle like a kettle boiling. Relvar's ears perked up immediately, swiveling toward the sound like radar dishes. Tea, Avery said quickly. I have a kettle on. Would you like some? I have earth blend and some of that Syr'kat root tea from the market. No. Relvar looked up at the treehouse, then back at Avery. Something flickered in his expression. Do you have guests? Avery chose his words very carefully, like picking his way through a minefield. I believe everyone is safer inside during a search emergency. The forest can be dangerous, especially for the young. That's not an answer. It's the only answer I can legally give you. They stood there, locked in a respectful standoff. Relvar could see the care in Avery's eyes, the way he kept glancing up at his treehouse with concern. He noticed the fresh childproofing on the ladder rungs, soft padding wrapped around each step. He saw the small handprints on the gate that were definitely not human, too many fingers for one thing. Mr. Pike, Relvar said slowly, are you aware of Protocol 4.2? Painfully aware. And you understand the penalties for violating it? I understand the protocol is designed to protect children, Avery said carefully. I also understand that sometimes protocols don't account for every situation. Up in the treehouse, Pip had found Avery's emergency beacon and was tapping it with a stick, just playing. But for 2 seconds the beacon activated, sending out a ping that reached the drone network. Miles away, a junior technician named Davis noticed it on his screen, a brief silhouette, possibly juvenile Syr'kat, coordinates matching Pike's treehouse. 3 small heat signatures there and gone in an instant. But by the time he flagged it for review, Relvar was already in the middle of his investigation. Mr. Pike, Relvar said formally, his tone shifting to something official and cold. If you become aware of anything regarding these missing cubs, you are legally required to report it. I've submitted all required reports through proper channels, Avery replied honestly. Then I'll return with a warrant. Tomorrow morning. Dawn. Relvar paused, and something in his expression softened just slightly. I hope, for everyone's sake, that when I return, this situation can be resolved peacefully. I'll be here. As Relvar's vehicle pulled away, Avery climbed back up to find all 3 cubs sitting exactly where he'd left them, proud of their successful, quiet game. Lumi still had her eyes squeezed shut. You can open your eyes now, he told her gently. Did we win? She asked, one eye cracking open. Yeah, little one. You won. Was that scary person looking for us? Rao asked quietly. He was the observant one, the one who noticed everything. That was your pack leader, your commander. And yes, he's looking for you. Everyone is. Your parents are very worried. We can't go back. Pip said suddenly, his voice high with fear. The noise, the sirens, they hurt. They hurt our ears and nobody understands, and we just wanted them to stop. Now the truth came out. The cubs hadn't run away on a whim. When the alert sirens had started, the high-pitched wailing had been agony for their sensitive ears. They'd run toward the forest to escape the sound, gotten lost, and by the time they found Avery's treehouse, they were too scared and exhausted to know what else to do. The sirens are off now, Avery said gently. And when we get you home, I'll make sure someone knows about your ears. There are special protectors you can wear. But right now, I need you to understand that everyone thinks you're lost and in danger. We were, Lumi said simply. Then you found us. That evening, Avery stood in line at the Colonial Liaison Annex, the most bureaucratic building in the entire colony. The holiday skeleton crew meant only one window was open, and the line stretched out the door and around the building. Parents with crying babies, traders with shipping disputes, settlers with land claims, and one human trying to report 3 cubs he definitely had but couldn't admit to having. The waiting room was a symphony of frustration. A family of Altarians molted stress feathers all over the chairs. A Tyrellian kept changing colors from blue to red and back again. And everyone looked exhausted. When he finally reached the window after 2 hours, the clerk, a kind but overwhelmed Altarian whose feathers were already ruffled from dealing with difficult cases all day, pulled up the form on an ancient computer terminal. Purpose of visit? She asked without looking up. I need to file a found juveniles report. Excellent. Fill out Form J7. You'll need to certify that you maintained appropriate distance as per Protocol 4.2. But I didn't maintain distance. They're in my treehouse. The clerk's feathers ruffled even more, some falling onto her keyboard. Then you can't file a found juveniles report. You'd need to file a custody emergency form. Okay, give me that one. Are you their legal guardian? No. Then you can't file a custody emergency. You'd need. What form? Avery interrupted as patiently as he could manage. Do I fill out to report that I have 3 missing cubs, they're safe, and their parents need to come get them? The clerk blinked slowly, her large eyes reflecting the computer screen. That would be Form G17, but it requires you to certify that you did not make contact with the juveniles you're reporting contact with. So I need to lie to tell the truth? I don't make the rules, sir. I just process the forms. Behind him in line, a human parent with a fussy toddler was struggling, trying to juggle bags and paperwork while the child cried. Without thinking, Avery helped them rearrange their bags and fashioned a quick toy from some wire and paper clips from the counter, bending them into a simple spinning toy. The toddler stopped crying immediately, fascinated by the simple creation. Thank you, the parent whispered. We've been here 3 hours. Other parents in line noticed, and soon Avery was helping several families, his natural caretaking instincts taking over even in this frustrating place. He made paper airplanes for bored children, helped elderly colonists with their forms, shared his water with a pregnant woman who looked ready to faint. You're good with children, the Altarian clerk observed when he finally made it back to the window. I just treat them like people, Avery said. Small people who need help sometimes. The cubs you're trying to report, they're the commander's missing cubs, aren't they? Avery said nothing, but his silence was answer enough. The clerk leaned forward, lowering her voice. The system is broken. We all know it. Fill out Form J7, say you maintain distance. I'll backdate it to before your proximity violation. It's not ideal, but it'll get processed. I can't lie on an official form. Then those cubs stay missing in the system for another 2 days. Meanwhile, back at headquarters, the junior technician's report about the ghost ping finally reached Relvar's desk. Davis had stayed late, enhancing the image, running it through every filter he knew. 2 seconds of footage, but it was enough. 3 small heat signatures in Pike's treehouse, approximately the size of Syr'kat cubs. Dawn warrant approved, Relvar told his team. We go in first thing. Full search, but... He paused, thinking about the human's careful words, the child-proofing, the obvious care, no aggressive tactics. Something about this doesn't add up. The weather alert system started screaming. The storm had jumped forward again. Instead of tomorrow afternoon, it would arrive tonight. The meteorologists were calling it a cascade event, multiple pressure systems colliding at once. Severe winds, heavy rain, danger to life and property. Avery ran home, his long legs eating up the distance. The cubs needed to be prepared for what was coming. As he climbed his ladder, he could already feel the change in the air, that electric tension that preceded big storms. The cubs were right where he'd left them, but they'd been busy. They'd organized his entire tool collection by size and shininess. They'd built an elaborate fort out of his books. And somehow they'd figured out how to make his old radio play music. Storm? Pip asked, his ears already flat with worry. The wind was picking up, making the trees sway. Storm, Avery confirmed. But we're safe up here. I built this place to survive anything. He showed them the safety equipment harnesses that he quickly adjusted for their smaller size, the backup rope ladder coiled and ready, the emergency shelter supplies packed in waterproof bags. Everything a responsible human would have in a treehouse, especially one who used to work in colonial emergency services before switching to maintenance for a quieter life. Why do you have cup-sized harnesses? Rao asked, ever observant. I volunteer for search and rescue sometimes, Avery explained. Always be prepared, that's the human motto. The first raindrops hit just as the sun set. They sounded like drums on the reinforced roof, a steady rhythm that quickly intensified. Then the wind picked up properly, making the massive ironwood trees sway and sing their haunting song, a deep, resonant humming that seemed to come from the earth itself. By midnight the storm was in full force. Lightning split the sky into fragments of white and purple, illuminating the forest in stark, terrifying snapshots. The wind howled like something alive and angry, trying to find any weakness in Avery's construction. The power grid flickered and went out, leaving only the emergency lights Avery had installed, soft blue glows that ran on battery power. The cubs were terrified. They huddled together in their blanket nest, making small distress calls that broke Avery's heart. It was a sound their species made instinctively when separated from their pack, designed to carry long distances. But in the storm it just seemed small and lost. He sat with them, telling calm stories about Earth weather, about how storms were just the planet's way of moving water around, nothing personal. He talked about the water cycle, about clouds and rain, and how every storm eventually passed. On Earth, he said, keeping his voice steady and soothing, we have a saying, the sun always shines above the clouds. Even when you can't see it, it's still there. Then Pip, brave little Pip, heard something outside, or thought he did. Maybe it was his mother calling? The distress calls had triggered something primal in him, a need to respond to find his pack. He scrambled toward the window before Avery could stop him, pushed through the emergency exit flap that Avery hadn't properly secured, a mistake that would haunt him later, and suddenly he was outside on the platform in the full fury of the storm. The wind immediately knocked him sideways. His claws, so useful for climbing in normal weather, scrambled uselessly on the wet wood. He managed to grab onto a branch, but it was thin, already bending under his slight weight, dipping toward a 30-foot drop onto rocks below. Pip! Lumi screamed. Avery didn't hesitate. He grabbed the emergency harness, clipped himself to the safety line he'd installed years ago, and went out after the cub. The rain hit him like bullets, cold and sharp. The wind tried to tear him off the platform, gusts that would have knocked over a smaller person. But he kept moving, talking in a calm, steady voice that somehow cut through the storm. Pip, look at me. Just look at me, not down. Good boy. Now breathe how I'm breathing. And out, that's it. You're doing so well. The branch cracked. Not completely, but enough. Pip squeaked in terror, a high sound that was almost lost in the thunder. Avery lunged forward, his training taking over. He wrapped himself around the cub just as the branch gave way completely. For a moment they were falling, Avery's stomach dropping as gravity claimed them. Then the safety line went taut with a sharp jerk that drove all the air from his lungs. They swung like a pendulum, heading straight for the massive trunk. Avery twisted in midair, a move that pulled every muscle in his back, taking the impact against the tree trunk with his shoulder to protect Pip. Pain shot through him like lightning, but he held on, using his free hand to grab a stronger branch and pull them to safety. What he didn't know was that Relvar's team had arrived early, driven by the storm's intensity to check on the humans' property. They stood at the base of the tree, watching in stunned silence as Avery performed the rescue in conditions that would have challenged their best emergency responders. Get medical ready, Relvar ordered quietly, his opinion of the human completely transformed. This wasn't someone hiding cubs for nefarious purposes. This was someone protecting them. Sir, he's coming down on his own. Indeed, Avery was slowly, carefully making his way down the rope ladder, Pip tucked inside his jacket, the cubs purring audible even over the storm. The little one had his face pressed against Avery's chest, all four paws clinging to his shirt. When he reached the ground, he found himself surrounded by officials, emergency lights blazing through the rain, and one very emotional Syr'kat mother. My babies. Tova cried, and suddenly all three cubs were tumbling out of the treehouse. Rao and Lumi had followed them down despite Avery's shouts to stay, and into her arms. Mama? They cried in unison. Mama, we were so scared. But the human found us. He gave us pancakes. He taught us safety rules. He saved Pip from falling. Avery stepped back, exhausted, soaked, his shoulder throbbing with what was probably a dislocated joint. He waited for the arrest, the formal charges, the consequences of violating Protocol 4.2. Instead, Relvar stepped forward and did something unprecedented. He saluted. Not a Syr'kat salute, but a human one, which he must have looked up and practiced. Mr. Pike, I'm going to need a full report, he said formally. Then more quietly, after medical checks you for injuries. And after we get everyone somewhere dry. Under a hastily erected emergency shelter, as the storm continued to rage, the full story came out. Avery's attempts to report the cubs. The system that kept hanging up on him. The 3 days of careful caretaking, the pancakes, the safety rules, the quiet games. You tried to report them immediately? Relvar asked, disbelief coloring his voice. The moment I found them. But the system detected I was near them and cut the call. Then it blocked my number. That's insane, someone muttered. It's Protocol 4.2, the administrator BKO said, arriving late and flustered. Designed to prevent predatory behavior by maintaining separation between adults and unrelated juveniles. It prevented a good man from returning our cubs. Tova said, still clutching her children. They've been safe this whole time and we've been dying of worry. The protocols protected no one this time, Relvar said, loud enough for everyone to hear. They prevented a good man from doing the right thing. This needs to change. The junior technician finally got brave enough to push forward with his data pad. Sir, I have something. The ghost ping from yesterday, it confirms Mr. Pike's timeline. The cubs were there the whole time. And look, he zoomed in on the enhanced image, they're playing. Safe. Happy. BKO from the Liaison office was holding a pile of forms. Now we'll need to process this properly. No, Relvar cut him off. We're done with forms that prevent truth. Effective immediately, under emergency authority, I'm implementing Protocol 4.2a, the Safety First Addendum. Any adult who finds juveniles in distress may provide immediate aid and shelter while reporting to authorities. No penalties for proximity. No blocked emergency calls. Common sense overrides bureaucracy. There was a murmur of approval from the gathered crowd. Several parents openly applauded. The storm was beginning to pass, the rain softening from assault to patter. "Mr. Pike," BKO said, pulling out a simple form. "Would you like to file your report now?" Avery looked at the single-page document. It had 3 lines: what happened, what you did, outcome. He wrote, "Found 3 scared cubs. Kept them safe. They're home now." BKO stamped it with a smile. Report accepted. Someone had brought a camera drone, and they all crowded together for a photo, soaking wet, exhausted but smiling. The cubs had crawled back to Avery and were clinging to him even as their mother held them. Lumi had her tiny fist wrapped around his finger. "They smell like syrup," Tova said, half laughing, half crying. "Pancakes," Avery explained. "It's a human thing. Breakfast food. Comfort food." "Comfort," she repeated. "Yes. You gave them comfort when they needed it most." 2 weeks later, the sun shone bright on the Singing Canopy as a small crowd gathered at Avery's treehouse for a ribbon-cutting ceremony. The space had been officially designated as the colony's first cross-species emergency shelter and safety training center. A new sign hung on the fence, written in multiple languages: "Approach human, snacks available, safety first." "We renamed the sign," BKO said proudly. "The old one was causing misunderstandings." "Better," Avery agreed. "It tells the truth." The treehouse now had official safety equipment funded by the colony: better harnesses, emergency communication systems that actually worked, reinforced anchor points for rescue operations. A small plaque by the door read, "Protocol 4.2a, the human clause, established after 3 cubs chose pancakes over panic." Relvar stood next to Avery, watching cubs of various species learn basic rope ladder safety from a certified instructor, who happened to be Avery himself, now officially part of the emergency response team. "You've changed things," Relvar said. "The cubs changed things," Avery corrected. "I just made breakfast." Speaking of cubs, Pip, Rao and Lumi came bounding up the ladder like they owned the place. Pip immediately went to test the new safety equipment, fearless now that he understood how it worked. Rao sat in his favorite spot, copying Avery's teaching posture, learning by observation as always. And Lumi appointed herself assistant instructor, making sure everyone followed the rules. "Harness first," she squeaked at a young Altarian who was getting ahead of himself. Avery said, "Safety first, then climbing." The afternoon was filled with training, laughter, and more than a few pancakes. Parents learned emergency protocols while their children played safely in the treehouse. The fear and suspicion that had marked those 3 days of searching had been replaced by trust and community. "You know," Tova said, approaching Avery during a break, "I never thanked you properly." "No thanks needed. Anyone would have done the same." "No," she said firmly. "They wouldn't have. Most people would have followed the rules, stayed away, let the system handle it. You chose my cubs over your own safety. That's not nothing." As the day wound down, Avery stood on his platform, looking out over the gathered families. Someone had started a cookout below, and the smell of various cultural foods mixed with the sweet resin scent of the ironwood trees. Humans grilling hamburgers, Syr'kat roasting their traditional root vegetables, Altarians preparing their fermented seed dishes. Everyone sharing, everyone together. "One more demonstration," someone called out. "Show us the pancake flip." Avery grinned, fired up his camping stove and made a perfect pancake. As he flipped it high into the air, a small furry paw shot out, Lumi of course, and snatched it mid-flight. The crowd erupted in cheers and laughter. "That's still theft," Avery called out, but he was smiling. "I'll be filing charges. You'll have to catch me first." Lumi squeaked, scampering up the tree with her prize. In his official report to the Colonial Administration, Relvar would write, "The 3-day search for missing cubs ended not with advanced technology or extensive protocols, but with a human, a treehouse, and the simple act of caring. Mr. Pike's actions have led to substantial reforms in our emergency response system. The implementation of Protocol 4.2a has already prevented 2 similar incidents from escalating." But the report that mattered more was the one Lumi drew in crayon and stuck to Avery's refrigerator. It showed 3 small figures and 1 tall one in a tree, surrounded by hearts and stars, with the words, "My hero," written in shaky letters across the top. She'd even drawn the pancakes. The Singing Canopy hummed its ancient song as the sun set, the ironwood trees swaying gently in the evening breeze. In the treehouse, Avery was teaching a new group of cubs the basics of emergency preparedness, while their parents watched from below, no longer afraid of the human who lived in the trees. "Remember," Avery said, helping a tiny Altarian adjust her safety harness, "the most important rule isn't about equipment or protocols. It's about looking out for each other. That's what keeps us all safe." Pip, who had become something of a celebrity after his storm adventure, raised his paw. "Even if the rules say not to?" Avery thought about those 3 days, the frustrating phone calls that went nowhere, the blocked emergency line that should have helped, the forms that made no sense, and the 3 scared cubs who just needed someone to keep them safe until the storm passed. "Especially then," he said. "Rules are important, but they should help us protect each other, not prevent it. And if a rule stops you from helping someone who needs it, then maybe it's the rule that needs changing, not you." From below, Tova called up, "Dinner's ready." "And yes, Avery, we made pancakes. Earth style and Syr'kat style." "Syr'kat style pancakes?" Avery asked, intrigued. "We added purple root and singing herbs," Tova explained. "They change color when you cook them." The cubs insisted. As everyone climbed down for the communal meal, Avery took one last look around his treehouse. The emergency supplies were properly stocked and organized. The communication equipment worked perfectly, he'd tested it 6 times. The safety protocols were clear and sensible, written in simple language that anyone could understand. But more importantly, the space had become what he'd always intended it to be, a place where anyone, regardless of species or situation, could find safety and acceptance. The ghost ping that had almost revealed the cub's location was now framed in the emergency response center, labeled, "The 2 seconds that changed everything." Below it, someone had added a handwritten note. "Sometimes the best hiding spots are the ones where someone's actually looking out for you." As the stars came out over Riverspine Outpost, the cubs played on the rope ladder they'd learned to use safely, their parents chatted below about the new protocols that made everyone feel more secure, and Avery flipped another pancake, ready for whatever small, furry paw might try to steal it. The storm had passed. The cubs were safe. The rules had been rewritten. And in a treehouse at the edge of the Singing Canopy, a human maintenance technician had proved that sometimes the most important protocol was the simplest one. When someone needs help, you help them. Even if it takes 3 days, a storm, and a lot of pancakes to make everyone else understand why. The next morning's colony newsletter featured a photo of the treehouse with its new sign. The headline read, "Approach Human, How One Man's Breakfast Changed Our Emergency Protocols." The article went on to explain how the new Protocol 4.2a had already been adopted by 6 neighboring colonies, with more requesting information daily. But Lumi, who had learned to read remarkably quickly, preferred her own version. She'd made a sign for Avery's door that said, "Pancake Man lives here. Cubs welcome. Toolbox still off limits." And that, more than any official designation or protocol change, was what really mattered. A month later, Avery received an official commendation from the colonial governor. The ceremony was held in the main plaza, with hundreds attending. But what touched him most wasn't the medal or the formal recognition. It was Pip, Rao, and Lumi insisting on standing with him during the ceremony, wearing tiny safety harnesses they decorated with glitter and stickers. "These are my assistants," Avery explained to the governor. "They teach me as much as I teach them." "What do they teach you?" the governor asked, charmed by the cubs' serious expressions. "That being different doesn't mean being dangerous," Avery said. "That safety rules should make sense. And that pancakes are a universal language." "Pancakes!" Lumi shouted, right into the microphone, making everyone laugh. Later, as the celebration wound down, Avery found himself sitting on a bench with Relvar, watching the cubs play with children from a dozen different species. They'd invented a new game that seemed to involve a lot of climbing and absolutely no regard for species-typical behavior. "You know what the real irony is?" Relvar said. "What's that?" "Protocol 4.2 was my idea. 5 years ago, after a bad incident on another colony. I pushed for it, fought for it, insisted it would keep cubs safer. It was a good intention," Avery said diplomatically. Intention isn't impact, Relvar replied. You taught me that. Rules without flexibility become cages, even when they're meant to be shields. They sat in comfortable silence, watching Lumi organize an elaborate game of safety inspector, where she got to wear a tiny hard hat and tell everyone they were doing things wrong. She's going to run this colony someday, Avery said. God help us all, Relvar laughed. The changes rippled outward like waves from a stone dropped in still water. Other colonies began reviewing their emergency protocols. The Academy of Interspecies Relations added a new course on practical ethics in emergency response, with Avery's case as the primary study material. But the biggest change was in the small daily moments. Parents who had been suspicious of the weird human in the tree now waved when they passed. Cubs who had been taught to fear strangers learned that sometimes strangers were just friends you hadn't made yet. And emergency responders across the sector added a new unofficial motto to their training: what would Pike do? 6 months after the incident, Avery was working on expanding the Treehouse platform when he heard familiar chittering. He looked down to find Pip, Rao and Lumi at the base of the tree, each carrying a small backpack. We're here for our lesson, Pip announced. I don't have a lesson scheduled today, Avery said, climbing down. Not safety lesson, Rao explained. Pancake lesson. Mama says we're old enough to learn cooking. But only if you teach us, Lumi added. Because you make the best pancakes in the galaxy. The galaxy's a big place, Avery said, ruffling her fur. But okay. First rule of cooking, wash your hands. Or paws. Or whatever you've got. As they climbed up to the treehouse, chattering excitedly about toppings and techniques, Avery thought about how much had changed. 6 months ago, he'd been a loner who lived in a tree and kept to himself. Now he was part of a community, a trusted figure, someone parents sent their cubs to learn from. All because he'd chosen to help instead of hide. To act instead of avoid. To make pancakes for 3 scared cubs when the rules said he should have walked away. The lesson was chaos as expected. Lumi got batter on the ceiling, Avery still wasn't sure how. Pip burned his first 3 attempts because he kept getting distracted by birds. Rao made a pancake so perfect it looked like it came from a professional kitchen, then immediately dropped it. But by the end, each cub had made something edible, and they sat together on the platform, eating their creations and watching the sun set through the ironwood leaves. Avery? Lumi asked, syrup dripping down her chin. Yeah. Will you always be here? In the treehouse. Avery thought about it. He'd had job offers from other colonies, better positions with more pay. The governor had offered him a position as director of emergency services. But none of that felt right. I'll be here as long as you need me, he said finally. Forever then, Pip said matter-of-factly. Forever's a long time. That's okay, Rao said quietly. We've got pancakes. And somehow that made perfect sense. The story of the 3 cubs and the human in the treehouse became legend in the sector. Parents told it to their children as a bedtime story. Emergency responders used it as a training scenario. Philosophers debated its implications for interspecies ethics. But for Avery, Pip, Rao and Lumi, it was simpler than all that. It was the story of how strangers became family. How fear became trust. How 3 days of chaos became a lifetime of connection. And how sometimes, the most important thing you can do is make pancakes for someone who needs them, even when the whole world is telling you to walk away. The treehouse still stands at the edge of the Singing Canopy. The sign still reads, "Approach humans, snacks available." Cubs still come to learn about safety and courage and the importance of good breakfast food. And every morning, if you listen carefully, you can hear the sound of pancakes being flipped, followed by the inevitable giggle as a small paw snatches one from midair. Some things, after all, never change. And that's exactly how it should be.